In South Korea, military service is compulsory for every healthy young male citizen over 18 years of age, mainly because of the unresolved conflict with North Korea. Indeed, the Korean War, which was active between 1950 to 1953, is still technically on pause, not officially declared ended to this day. It seldom happens for the soldiers to face an actual conflict with North Korean force, but despite the relative safety, it is understandably a big step and frankly a burdensome one in most of young Korean men's life. You have to live your normal life with family, friends, and, provided you are lucky enough, lovers behind, and spend a significant length of time of your young adulthood cut off from the outworld, doing the jobs largely irrelevant to what your area of study or career choice is. The ranks of soldiers, from private to sergeant, are filled with those on compulsory service, and there are significant gap between the treatment and condition these soldiers get and what the higher ranks of non-commissioned officers and officers get, who chose the professional careers in the military. For a long time, soldiers had to go through their 2 years or longer service period with no means of contact to the outer world other than communal TV and public phones, getting a few dollars worth of token of a salary, in a cramped barracks, and no freedom to go out of the military base even on off-duty hours. Often riddled with bullying or abuse from the senior ranks or officers. The condition has improved a lot over the past decade. The service period has reduced to 18 months, and soldiers are now allowed to own personal mobile phones and have wide access to internet. But their salary is still less than the national minimum wage and have no freedom to go out of the base. So imagine hundreds and thousands of young guys in the peak of their youth contained in the military base, often tucked in the mountains away from other civilization. It forms a very intense and sometimes claustrophobic world, full of its own rules, logics, and jargons. Imagine all the accumulation of the energies, frustrations, boredom, and repressed longings of these young boys. No wonder many military bases make a fertile backdrop of all sorts of stories, including ghost or horror stories. Sadly, for those who haven't experienced the very particular world of Korean military service, it might be a bit tricky to fully understand the dynamics. Today I picked up strange and paranormal stories from the military and tried to smooth and modify to make them to be more universally accessible. 4 allegedly true stories from the Korean military. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. Hardly any young man comes willingly to the military service. It is only natural, stuck in the military base for months in, months out, to dream about the civilian freedom outside, and even sometimes of desertion. But desertion cases never ends in a good way, and most would just swallow and carry on. Most, but not all. In the boot camp for the Air Force floats around this story about 4 deserters, which is a bit stupid since one could still drop out during the boot camp training. Into the 3rd week of the training, there were 4 airmen basics who were particularly unhappy, each with their own issues. Dumped by a girlfriend, family going bankrupt, picked on and bullied by a drill sergeant. They tried to deal as best as they could, but stuck in the camp with almost no contact to the outside world and not a single hour allowed to themselves, it became quickly clear they could not do anything. The oldest of the 4 then suggested to desert the camp. "Are you mad? We could just quit and go home too. One of the other three protested. Huh, do you think they'll let you go easy like that? I'm sure they'll torture us with extra drills and PTs till we change our minds. I'm going. I have nothing to lose. In the worst case, I'll just slit my throat or something in front of that bitch who dumped me. The other two chimed in, and the reluctant one was dragged in the end. After all, his life in the boot camp turned into a hell when his former school bully turned up as his drill sergeant. The oldest one was pushing his plan hard and declared that they escape right that night. They all volunteered for the dreaded midnight night watch duty and managed to sneak out in the moonless dark of the night. The oldest one must have spent some time contemplating the plan. He led the way through the target practice field at the back of the base with the least watch posts. There was a little stream providing them with a ditch to hide on the way out too. So they managed to climb over the multiple barbed wire fences, and by the time they finally got out and started climbing up the mountain, they were already a whole mess of cuts, bruises, and ripped clothes. The reluctant one seemed to having a belated regret. Can't we just go home? What? After all this? Piss off! Other chimed in too. Yeah, you're ruining everything. Go back by yourself. So in the end, the reluctant one turned around alone and took the way back. Halfway down, he met a rice field and took the narrow bank around it, which seemed stretching out endlessly. Suddenly he felt something at his back and turned around. The other three deserters were now following him too. He felt relieved that they changed their mind too, but they looked very grim and none was saying anything. He just assumed they were still pissed about him, so he just quietly led the way. He found a street lamp across the rice field and decided to just walk across the field to shorten the way. Shall we just walk across the rice field? Nobody replied. I know you are still mad at me, but surely we'll survive this. Let's go. The reluctant one jumped into the wet rice field, and others, though without a single reply, still followed him. Strangely, it seemed he could never reach the lamp post. He walked on and on, but the rice field just continued on. Stranger still, after a lengthy walk, he found the rice plants had been already stomped on as if somebody had made a way for them. Except the way just carried on and on. He was getting exhausted and had a hard time to keep his eyes opened while the other three were still not saying a word to him. In the end, he crouched down on the spot to rest a little. Other guys were just looking down on him with wooden faces. He couldn't care less about whatever they were thinking anymore and dozed off. When he got up, it was already dawn. He was surprised to find himself alone. The other three must have deserted him. But he was shocked to find the rice field he had thought endless the previous night was actually tiny, and that he'd been walking along the same circle in the middle of it. But he tried to explain it away that he must have been too exhausted and it was too dark at night. Back in the boot camp, he turned himself in and ended up in the military jail for a few days. He did ask about the other three deserters, but was only told that they hadn't returned yet. What really happened to them he learned only after he came out of the jail. One was found dead under a cliff. Another was found dead with a blunt trauma on his head. The last one was never found. The military investigators had concluded that the first one stumbled and fell off the cliff to his death, which left the other two arguing, and in the end one of them killed the other with a blow with a stone. But then, what were those three that followed him around? And what was happening in the rice field? I served in the small army base not far from the city of Chuncheon. Soldiers' daily routine included, on top of the designated work during the day, the dreaded night watch duty. On the night watch, you usually either stay put at the checkpoint or patrol around the fence line of the base. It was a tiny base with a small number of soldiers, so even a sergeant near his discharge could not be exempt of this duty. It was one Saturday must have been January, because it was about a month before my discharge. I was on the patrol duty. Big snowflakes were falling, making the chilly winter night feel somewhat fluffier and quieter. Heading towards 2 in the morning, as I was passing the mess hall, the lights inside came on. I checked out through the window and saw a private taking a bottle of water out of the fridge and gulping it down. I suddenly felt like a bit of fun and decided to prank him. I took my helmet off and tapped the window with my fingernail while shining my face with a flashlight from the below. He must have been still drowsy and was slow to react. He turned towards the window, looked at me for a few seconds, and then fell on his back. I was stunned. I expected a little scream or jump scare, but not that. So I rushed into the mess hall. A corporal also came by, saying he heard some crushing noise from the hall and came to check out. Inside the hall was the private fainted on the floor. We brought him in the barrack and shook him to wake up. The private said he was fine, but contrary to what he was saying, he was still shaking all over. "I'm sorry, I just meant to prank you a bit. Shake it off and go back to bed. I'll buy your lunch tomorrow to make it up," I said, and sent him to his bed. On my way back to my watch duty, the corporal said to me, "Sergeant, don't forget the washing you dropped." "What? What washing? Why would I be carrying a washing during a night watch?" "But that's odd." "You two go back to bed, and don't spread around what just happened," I said, and went out. Next day, I took the private to the Chinese restaurant to treat him as I had promised. He must have been still in shock and didn't dig in the jjajangmyeon, black bean noodle, which I knew was his favorite. I ordered a bottle of soju and poured him a glass, which he gulped down one after another. After the fourth shot, he finally opened his mouth. "I didn't faint because of your prank, Sergeant," he said. "What? What else then?" I asked. "I saw immediately it was you and was just about to laugh, but then I saw it. Right on the left side of your face was a woman grinning at you." I froze. He can't be. You are mistaken."
"No, Sergeant. At first I thought the same, but while I was watching, the woman got her lips closer to your face with a cold smile. I fainted because I couldn't deny it was there," he said.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't feel anything to start with. I lightly reproached him that his wild imagination played a trick on him. There was no ghosts. Even if there was, it wouldn't come to such a base as ours, situated near the city. But I couldn't shake off one thing. And upon returning to the base, I found the corporal from the previous night. "Corporal, last night, why did you think I had a washing with me?" I said.
"As I saw you entering the mess hall from the distance, I saw you carrying something whitish on your left shoulder, so I just assumed you took your washing from the washing line. Why, Sergeant, have you lost it?" he said. A story I heard from a fellow soldier who worked as the gate guard. One late night, there were hardly anybody or traffic in or out at the time of the day, and the gunner, usually of a senior rank, had left a duty to his assistant and was dozing inside the checkpoint. Then an old woman approached. The assistant gunner didn't bother to go through the riddle of password with her and just stepped out to ask her how he might help. She said she brought some bananas for the young boys working hard to defend the country and handed a black plastic bag. The assistant thanked her and explained that it was forbidden to eat anything while on duty. But the old woman insisted.
"I bought and brought it all this way. Can't you have one now, at least? Come, take this."
She wasn't going to go away, it seemed. The soldier got tired of dealing with the situation and said, "Okay, ma'am. I'll then have just one bite of it, and the rest I'll save for later." So he peeled one banana and put it in his mouth. Suddenly something hit his head from behind so hard that he fell on the ground. Stunned, the soldier looked up and found his senior gunner, panting hard and pointing the butt of his rifle at him, ready to strike him again. He protested.
"What are you doing, Corporal? I know it's banned to eat while on duty, but this is too much."
But the senior gunner shouted,
"What the hell were you doing with a muzzle in your mouth?"
Later, the corporal explained what he saw on the surveillance camera. The assistant gunner stepping outside the gate and mumbling something in the air for a while, before he pointing the muzzle of his rifle in his mouth. At that point, the corporal shot out and knocked him down. The poor assistant gunner could not understand any of that, and just repeated his story about an old woman and bananas. The military base I served in included a GP, a guard point within demilitarized zone, that was so close to the North Korean border. So close, one could literally hear North Korean soldiers sneezing from the other side on a quiet night. That particular GP had lots of dark history. One, a soldier was killed there, hit by a bullet from North Korean side. It was a stormy night, and the soldiers on duty had to abandon the checkpoint on the ground and moved into the bunker underneath, which happened to be very much exposed. A lightning-triggered claymore mines, 5 of them, which alarmed North Korean soldiers, and they shot back. And 1 bullet flew into the bunker, hit 1 soldier's head, and killed him on the spot. Ever since, soldiers on duty in the same bunker kept complaining about headaches, and some even claimed having seen a ghost. In the end, the bunker was blocked. And yet, another soldier hung himself in the same bunker. The bunker was just crudely blocked with thin wooden panels, which, with a force, gave enough room for 1 person to pass through. A corporal was dumped by his girlfriend during the vacation and returned to the base depressed. Unfortunately, other fellow soldiers only mocked him for being soft for a girl, and one rainy and thundery night, the corporal sneaked into the bunker and hung himself. When his body was found, the sign of struggle was obvious to see. But probably because of the rough weather, nobody seemed to have noticed the noise. The third incident was with a dog. In my base was a dog called Chilsun. She was a mix of several strong dog breed and was treated as an unofficial mascot of the base. One weekend, soldiers who were relaxing watching TV were alarmed by Chilsun's whimperings, apparently from the bunker. When a few soldiers came to check what was going on, Chilsun was jumping around, biting in the air as if fighting with an invisible attacker. She was going mad and breathless, and only when a soldier rescued her out of the bunker seemed to regain its breath. Since then, Chilsun stayed well away from the bunker. The final incident was yet another attack from the North Korean soldiers. There was a little clash, exchanging 20-odd bullets from each side. There was no casualty, but the bunker was ended up hit by some bullets, and its window with bullet holes. Later, an officer who believed in superstition discreetly brought in a shaman to show the bunker. The shaman's explanation was, apparently, in the bunker were indeed the spirits of dead soldiers, but their deaths were so sudden and violent they didn't seem to realize they were already dead, and would still turn up for their duty. The shaman then advised not to replace the window with a bullet hole, which would remind the poor souls of how they died and help them finally accept their death. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but when the bunker was reopened for use, the window with the bullet hole still intact, there were no more soldiers complaining about headache while on duty in the bunker. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. I myself served in the Air Force for, back in my days, 2.5 long years. As you might be able to pick up from my tone, I didn't enjoy it much. Suffered an extended period of depression and so on, though in the end I think I emerged a bit more enlightened about myself at the end of it. The military service is indeed very intense experience, and many who have gone through it would say they had their worst nightmare being drafted back to the military at least once after their discharge. I had one too, Though in the dream, for some reason, I found myself stationed at an all-female platoon. I have no idea why. Next week, I'm going to read one more story from the military, a long, poignant story too. Hope you stay tuned. If you liked my work, please give my videos thumbs up, leave comments, share it with others, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you haven't yet, do check out my previous episodes of varying themes. Your support keeps me going. Until the next, stay safe and take care.